Gentlemen, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining our quarterly uh, podcast. We have, as usual, a celebrity guest. This time it's Rachit Mohan. Rachit, of course, has got a phenomenal background, which I want to just quickly dwell upon. So, Rachit leads the India Data Center Advisory Team at JLL. It's a 20-member team spread across the country and he has a deep understanding of the subject. It's today one of the hottest industries globally, not just in India. In India, we're actually just getting started with just about 1 gigawatt or just over 1 gigawatt of data center capacity. The team that Rachid leads has the market power and expertise to make the data center project a success, regardless of size, scope, or location. Rachit has over 22 years of experience in the real estate leasing, investments, and of course, data center, which is a new business in India. He has concluded transactions upwards of 15 million square feet across 290 deals. Has been extremely mobile and worked across four cities with JLN, including New Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, and New York. So this is a brief introduction. Rachit, thank you so much for being with us today. And as you can see, the number of people joining is a bit like Virat Kohli's innings. Every few minutes, we're getting more and more people joining this call. But I want to kick it off really with a sort of an open-ended question, which is, I'm sure, on everyone's mind. What exactly how would you classify the overall data center opportunity in India? How big is it? How big is this thing going to get? Because it hasn't been, I think, every week we end up getting a major announcement of either just Google or the Adanis, Reliance Industries, of course, and even some of the smaller players announcing pretty sizable projects. So we'd like to hear about the overall opportunity to start with.
I think if you had asked me this question about 2 years ago, a lot of the TAM of this business opportunity would have linked to the growth of digitization, the mobility growth, 5G growth, and all those factors continue to be there. And many things that we continue to read about across various reports and papers and stuff like that. But really, if you look at it today, a lot of the growth which is coming in is actually from artificial intelligence and AI workloads per se. But before I get into that, uh, when we look at data center demand, it really comes in from three or four broad use cases, right? The first large use case is enterprises. We're seeing that enterprises, including banks, financial institutions, financial services companies, visual effects companies, pharma companies, all these kind of regulated institutions are out in the market to grow and set up larger, higher quality, very, very resilient new infrastructure. And they are looking at leasing data center space in the market. So that's number one. The second use case is more of a connectivity kind of a use case where an OTT player wants to push content and needs to host servers in a certain network dense data center. So that's a second use case, what we call edge. The third use case is cloud. So
Yeah.
all the applications that we're using, the Microsoft applications, Amazon applications, all the new apps, Book My Show, and all these kind of apps that we use, which are running on cloud platforms like GCP or AWS, all those cloud platforms are growing, largely led by the large American tech companies or cloud companies, and they are driving a lot of the demand in cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai, Noida. And and what we're seeing is that they are continuing to grow, and their growth is completely linked with the GDP growth of an economy, the growth of businesses in a particular country. So that's pretty real. The fourth piece is AI, which is really accelerated over the last 1.5 years, where the TAM for that demand is very large, and we're talking about very large AI training workloads coming into markets like India, where we are seeing large 500 megawatt to 1 gigawatt data center clusters getting built. And
Yep.
and that really, because of that, I think the limiting piece on that opportunity really would be availability of power or supply chain. But the demand is really going to be out of the box.
Fantastic. The one thing I was talking to a foreign investor recently was that unlike China, the Google of India is not Baidu as it's in China. The Google of India is actually Google.
Yeah,
Similarly, the Hotmail or the Facebook of India is actually Facebook of Meta. So,
yeah.
what about the localization of data? And that's something which the government seems very keen and intent on doing. I don't think we have today the data center capacity to house all of the 1.4, 1.5 billion people in India, assuming all of them are not, even if all of them are not necessarily on social media. But the fact is, we have now a penetration of almost 800 million smartphones in India. So, and most of these are riding on 4G and 5G networks. 3G is a thing of the past. So, getting all of this data onto residing not in California, not in Arizona, but in India, is that going to be a huge driver as well? You think?
So, Gautam, data localization, while there is no the policy framework never really made it through,
Yeah,
but most of the regulators, especially RBI and some of the other regulators, have really been going after the regulated entities, telling them to keep their data in India, especially the data around Indian population per se. The,
yeah,
the big piece of data which is not yet coming to India is the OTT content. So all the social media content that we are posting or we are seeing, none of that is getting hosted over here. All the search data which we are
mm,
viewing is not getting hosted in India. All the email for some of the big email servers that we are using, they're not hosted in India.
yeah,
So really that includes Google, your Meta, WhatsApp, Instagram. All that content is sitting outside, and the only thing which is happening is small cache in where some of this content really gets cached in, it gets downloaded and then gets pushed over to the users in India, right? Um, there is one topic about current data. A bigger topic around this is going to be future data because, every day the amount of new data that we are with IoT coming in, with technology coming in, the new apps coming in, the data we're collecting is a lot more, right?
mm,
Um, and how policy framework for historic data as well as new data is going to be, is going to be a big driver. Another piece which is going to play a part is the DP Act, which is the personal data protection bill, right?
yeah,
Which is actually started to deal with how our personal data is being dealt with by a social media player,
yeah.
by X or by Meta or any of them, who is the fiduciary for that data and who is processing that data and what can it be used for. But as you see things from the lens of uh, of a big cloud player, let's say if I'm Meta and I have
Yeah,
big data on Indian population sitting, let's say in the US,
yeah,
and I'm just using Meta as an example over here. If let's say that data is sitting in the US or let's say in Singapore, at some stage, because of my ambitions on artificial intelligence and training more data, I might be, because of the DPDP, I might be forced to bring future data into India and start using that for building AI models. So
Sure.
um, the opportunity is going to be very, very large over here. But in the interim, another piece which is really going to accelerate is going to be sovereign cloud and sovereign apps. We've
Yeah.
already seen the Ministry of Information Technology announced usage of Aratai by Zoho.
Yeah.
We've seen Rediff Mail really taking a comeback. We've seen Zoho Mail, which is really getting popular right now. So some
Yeah.
of these kind of applications, which are all fully hosted in India, are owned by Indians or Indian
Hmm.
institutions, are really also going to drive a lot of the growth per se.
I was reading a recent Goldman Sachs report which said that, and we discussed this last week when we met, that content created in the last 3 years is more than all of content created in history before that.
Yes.
So, anybody with a mobile phone, frankly, can shoot a short video or a short reel, which is today the most popular thing going around globally, and load it onto Instagram or YouTube. So that itself, I think, is going to feed into more data being, I guess, parked here in India, and hence the need. But the numbers we're looking at, and these are again media speculations, analyst speculations. We going from 1.2 gigawatts, I believe. What's the current number to 8 gigawatts by 2030?
Yeah.
Is that a realistic number? I.e., in the next 5 years, can we actually get to 8x the current capacity? And secondly, do we need this much capacity?
Yeah, I think step one is just to understand what does that 1.2 gigawatt mean,
Yeah,
right? The way we look at data center capacity, while we're counting it in megawatts and gigawatts, it's a representative of the space, cooling, power altogether. And the way
correct.
we track this data is we look at the land banks that the big data center developers are gathering. We look at
Yeah,
the power approvals that they are getting, the power they are actually delivering on the site. We look at the financial closures that they're doing, the data center shell that they are building, and the actual fit out of the MEP for the data center that they're doing. The
yeah.
1.2 gigawatt that you're talking about is the actual fitted out data center, which is
Oh,
getting consumed at the moment. But the TAM is pretty big, and that TAM is, if you followed me on the AI demand, is going to be so large that the demand it is going to be a factor of availability of power. So we
yeah,
all need to approach this with a perspective that it's a constrained power market. The power is limited. Transmission lines getting into tier one cities is limited. At
yeah,
some point, it'll run out, and then what? Right. So it is really, and that is what Jensen Huang of Nvidia is talking about. That is what some of the big data center investors are also looking at when they are doing discounted cash flows for valuation of these businesses per se. So that's really the ramp up, Gautam, which you're
yeah.
talking about. But it's going to grow. It's going to grow very, very quickly from here on.
Okay. It's interesting you spoke about power because there was an article about a few weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal which said that in the US, the hyperscalers are building their own power plants. But
Yes.
and to your point, as you said, it's not just whether there's enough power in the grid. The question is if you're building, I'm just giving an example, they're building a data center in the middle of the Mojave Desert, how do you connect to the grid? Because that itself is going to cost a bomb. So I think a lot of these guys are doing their own thing. I was reading an article recently about a company called Bloom Energy that's using solid oxide fuel cells, which we use natural gas as a fuel. So again, different sources are being used to generate power. Uh, what? So I have two questions around that. First of all, uh, are you hearing of domestic data centers focused on connecting to the grid, or doing something similar to what's being done in the US, i.e., building their own power plants within the campus of the data center? And are you hearing about any other alternative fuels that are being used?
Gautam, this is a very, very relevant point that you've raised right now. And honestly, if I can go back, 30 years in my career, and
Yeah.
if there was one class I would want to spend more time on in back in school, or engineering, would be physics. The amount of activity and innovation which is coming up in physics is unbelievable, and the whole gamut of energy infrastructure is all talking to, it's all coming basing from physics. So we'll,
Yeah.
we'll we'll talk about this. I think the first thing that we need to talk about, we've only just started scratching the surface, right?
Yeah.
Right now, the way demand is coming up. So what are we building, right? We're building colocation data
Yeah.
centers, which are speculatively built by data center operators. Then we're seeing build to suit data centers, which are coming up by, build to suit for the big tech cloud players. And these are scaling up. What we used to see 5, 10, 20, 30 megawatt data centers, now single buildings can be 50 to 100 megawatts. And we're seeing a campus of 500 megawatts. We're already socializing some 1 gigawatt data center campuses in the country. So scale is going to be very, very large. As of today, the way these, and depending on state to state and the policy framework, most of these data center campuses, which are at 220 kVA power levels or 400 kVA levels, a few of them which are still on under 10 kVA power levels, they are they're connected into the grid, um, either directly at the discom level or at the transmission company level. A lot of the 220 kVA level data centers are connected into the grid.
Yeah.
So they would be consuming, let's say, 30, 35, 40%, depending on where they are, um, percentage of power from discom power. And the remaining power that they are getting is coming behind the meter. It is coming from a captive renewable generation location, which could be
Sure.
solar or hydro or whatever, but largely solar. And there's a lot of solar that we have in India, right? Um, if you notice the Reliance AGM about a month and a half ago,
Yeah.
one of the big pieces that they talked about was putting up a very, very large solar transmission, coming all the way down to doing data centers in Jamnagar.
Yeah.
And what they are doing is they are backing that up with lithium ion, very, very large scale lithium ion batteries, which can give them 24 by 7 renewable power. So somebody like
Sure.
them would probably end up doing 24 by 7 large gigawatt cluster
Yeah.
off the grid and have a microgrid connected themselves. And that's a very, very exciting project, which we should be very proud of as Indians, as that is taking
Yeah.
shape. And this is in the public yeah, eyes already. It's in the, it's been announced. But and you will see as we go to these kind of bigger scale developments, you will see more such developments getting announced per se. But yeah, today most of the stuff is through the grid. You are still routing through the grid.
Through
Um,
the gate.
yeah, yeah. In terms of alternate fuels, right now it is largely whatever uh, uh, the grid is able to provide. So there is a combination of thermal, solar, wind, and hydro, which is really providing power.
Yeah.
India also has a huge amount of nuclear, which is going live between now and the next 3 to 5 years,
Yeah.
to the tune of almost 22 gigawatts of new nuclear, which is coming up, right? So you will see nuclear clean energy also coming in through the grid into these data
Yeah.
centers. So it's exciting times.
No, it's interesting your perspective on the power sector, but the fact is, I think one thing which we clearly want to understand, and this group wants to understand, is what are the major costs besides just power that go into the data center business? or putting up a data center. So it's land, of course, it's power. What else goes in, and what are the real economics of this business? At what point do you actually start making money? And if let's say, for example, I wanted to put up a data center, what should I be focused on in terms of costs, and what at what point do I actually start making money?
Yeah. I think one needs to first decide who am I building the data center for? Am I
Yeah,
building a large cluster for AI workloads, or am I building I mean that could be 500 megawatts if I've got very, very large scale power available and land along with that.
yeah,
That would be something very, very attractive. As of today, we are still more interested in being around the tier one cities where infrastructure is available. Um, the other piece could be going and building wholesale colocation, either for enterprises or for big cloud players, where you are building a speculative build per se, and the return expectations can vary per se. Either way, the big pieces, I mean, if you had to build out a data center, let's take an example of, let's say, in a market like Mumbai, right? If you are building a new campus in Navi Mumbai,
yeah.
where assume 15 or 20 acres of land, right? At 50 crores an acre, that land would probably be worth about, let's say, 1,000 crores of land. Uh,
Alone.
yeah. On
Yeah,
top of that, you'll bring in a 220 kVA power line. At 220 kVA, a substation, the power connection and the substation will probably cost you roughly around roughly around 180 to 200 crores on top, right?
sure.
On top of that, if you're putting up a shell, let's say you're building four buildings, or let's say you are building each building of 50 megawatt. Let's say you're building um, four buildings of 50 megawatt IT each, which means you're using 200 megawatts of power of IT power, which probably means raw power of about 300 megawatts.
Yeah,
So four buildings of 50 megawatt, each building would be, let's say, about a 500,000 square feet. The shell would cost you another 9,000 rupees a square feet into,
mm,
let's say, 500,000 square feet. So 2 million square feet of development.
yeah,
You've got roughly around, you assume 9,000 rupees a square feet. You'll have the math on the shell construction. And then there is the MEP investment, which is going in for the high side and
yeah,
then the low side. High side would be the DGs and the chillers, which are the long lead items. And then the low side is the fit out per se. Typically, the MEP investment would be roughly around 25 to 28 crores per megawatt
yeah,
per se. And or you can look at it slightly differently. Land aside, the entire build of the building with the MEP, you can assume about 45 to 50 crores per megawatt of investment going in that. Uh,
sure.
Typically, when we're building these data centers, the speculatively built wholesale data centers would rent at anything. I mean, in a Navi Mumbai type market, will probably rent at about 6,500 to 7,500 rupees per kilowatt. As power is getting constrained, those rents would go up, and
Yeah,
that would broadly turn out to be roughly 15% return on equity per se. Or you could do a build to suit. If you're doing a build to suit deal, we're talking about yield on costs of anywhere around 10.5 to 11% yield on costs,
oh,
hovering to a IRR of about 13-14%.
interesting. So I think a lot's going to depend on being close to power, as we discussed earlier, that there
Yeah,
isn't that much.
yeah,
I mean, the data centers are coming closer to the power versus
yeah,
trying to make their own power like they're in the US, because I guess the US is a much bigger country, vast country, so it's not easy to connect to the grid. But and then of course the land cost depending on where you are located.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
Gotham,
yeah,
US has its own challenges. They don't have power. Their transmission lines are running out. right?
Mm.
So literally what's happening right now, if I own a big factory land, let's say in Texas, and I have a
Yep.
gas pipeline, and there's a lot of that economy runs on gas, right? So if I've got
Yep.
a gas pipeline, I'll probably put a generation capacity on site and then put
Yep.
a data center next to that. But that is very expensive power again, right? So in
Yep.
the longer term, you're still betting on those Americans are still betting on bringing transmission lines to those locations. Now,
Yep.
once you get the transmission lines again, is it thermal power based on on American coal, or is it renewable power? That's another debate.
Sure. The other element, of course, is GPUs. They're not easy to get a hold of. They're expensive, and then of course now you've got Google's TPUs. So
Yeah.
one is costing, but the second element which I wanted to understand, and for you to answer, is obsolescence in that space. I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
I mean, it's not very different from your phone, right? I mean, you buy a phone, you use it
Yeah.
for a year or 2 years before it starts feeling slow and you're running out of storage and you want a new phone. So you're going
Yeah.
out and buying a new phone and then another one and another one.
Yeah.
It's a bit similar, right? So the use case is changing so quickly that there's so much innovation and we've beaten the Moore's law in bringing newer and newer kinds of chips right now.
Yeah.
It's exciting times. Another thing is you need to understand the AI labs, be it Anthropic or Google's Gemini or Grok
Or even ChatGPT.
or Chat GPT, right? Chat
Yeah.
GPT, their fundraising is a little, let's see how that goes. But most of the others, they're getting funded so rapidly, and then
Yeah.
Nvidia stock doing well. So there's a lot more venture capital investment, which is also going towards innovation and newer technologies. So the motivation to bring new chips is also very, very high, right?
Yeah.
And as these newer chips are coming in, one of the big things which is happening is when you actually training a big AI model on, let's say, NVIDIA H200 versus you get GB200, which is the new
Mm.
Blackwell chip, right?
Yeah.
So it costs more, but it can compute more
Much
as
more.
well.
Oh.
And on a power, so the actual efficiency, the kitna deti hai of this
Yeah.
of that you can use. So for a certain kind of training, it is, even if you're paying more, your cost of training it comes on a per power unit per kilowatt hour actually turns out to be lower in these newer chips. So there's always motivation to bring these new chips. Now, do you need a Ferrari for every use case? Maybe not. I mean, you would still have a BMW still do a decent job, or a Mercedes Benz doing a decent job. So it's a pretty similar thing, right? So not
Yeah.
every use case needs a Blackwell GB200, GB300, or a new Rubin chip, which is
Yeah.
state of the art. There are some use cases you're using it, but there are so many other models, so many other calculations that require normal chips as well. So there are chips at every level which are getting used per se.
Okay. The one thing I want to tell the audience is that I'm going to ask a few more questions, but any questions that you have, please start putting them on the chat or DM me directly on my WhatsApp number. Most of you have my WhatsApp invite as well, so you can do that. So I guess the other question I had, and that's something which actually came in earlier this morning about the economics of the data center business, and as some of the the larger industrial houses get into the data center business,
Yes.
is it possible that you would see them getting, the pricing start getting more competitive, and some of the smaller or the regional players may be edged out? Do you see at some, okay, I guess today we're not there yet because every megawatt of capacity has a buyer, has a need today. But do you see that happening at some point where pricing will start getting really competitive? And we have a history of a lot of the bigger players coming in and significantly reducing the pricing in every business that they get into. And data center, I suspect, will be no exception. But I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Gautam, it's a competitive space, right? And I think it's very quickly, just given the kind of capital requirement from an investment perspective, this will very, very quickly become a very big boys game, right? So
Yeah,
very, very deep capital sources are required. Holding capital is required. I think
yeah,
what is also interesting is, a lot of people confuse data center with real estate.
mm,
And I think, I did talk about some of the economics a few minutes ago, Gautam. So I
yeah,
won't go into that, but can answer questions around that.
sure,
But the return expectations are very similar to infrastructure, right? So when you're
mm,
in, as a business house or as an industrialist, you're looking at diversifying and looking at some of these kind of data center type of an asset class. You need
yeah,
to you need to think of it like infrastructure, right? Very similar to how you would look at a telco business, or
yeah,
you would look at roads and highways or dams, that kind of business. So your modeling has to be from a 20-year-old period. That
sure,
is when these returns are going to start making sense. There's going to
yeah,
be a fair amount of money to be made around ancillary businesses around this, just given that there's a big gold rush out there.
yeah,
But yes, and pricing, yes, there is competition.
yeah,
And one has to always sharpen their pencils in a market like India, where there's a lot of competition to get in and get business.
yeah,
But this is very strategic, right? So if I'm someone like Amazon,
mm,
um, just because another industrial house has decided to launch a data center development operating business doesn't mean that I would necessarily, give my next deal to that industrialist, right? I
yeah,
would need to look at how am I getting de-risked
mm,
for my infrastructure, for my most critical infrastructure in India, uh,
yeah,
per se, right? So counterparty and balance sheet and ability to navigate through the red tapeism or the single window
yeah.
clearance is going to be important to see per se. But
Okay.
balance sheet, yeah, this is very, very long-term hold kind of a business, and that's how we model these deals.
So we've got a bunch of questions that have started coming in. So I want to read out the first one. How
Yes.
severe a bottleneck is cooling water versus power?
So, you need power to power up the servers,
Yeah,
and you need resiliency for that, which
yeah,
means, if you have one source of power, you need another source of power. You have one backup, you need another backup. A big part of that is, part of it is going towards powering up the servers. Another part is going towards the cooling, right? Now
yeah,
that cooling infrastructure, we are constantly working on making it more and more efficient. Now, in India, in our tier one cities, most of this cooling which is happening, you have water-based chillers and air-based chillers. Um,
yeah,
Water-based chillers are more efficient, but you can't depend on water permanently.
yeah,
Um, so which is why we see either hybrid or more air-based chillers getting used per se. But
yeah,
we keep toying with the idea, how can water be brought in? Are there nearby industries? Can I get some gray water? Can I clean it and use it
yeah.
for chillers and all, which can help reduce the cost and keep it more cyclical per se?
Okay. The next question is, what are your views on the TCS Hypervolt initiative?
I think it's a very, very uh, interesting move per se. Gautam, you yourself also had some interesting views around this.
Yep.
But TCS is partnered with TPG
Yep.
to build this new platform, and there have been some new announcements which are also coming in. I think one of the big piece is the whole AI story. Uh,
Mm.
if you follow the news in the US, there are at least 10 or 15 new 1 gigawatt plus campuses which have been announced by
Yep.
Meta, OpenAI. We saw Stargate program getting launched. We've got Meta's new campus coming up in Louisiana. That's 5 gigawatts. We've got
Wow.
Amazon building in Indiana. That's 1.6 gigawatts. We've got a lot of these very large AI campuses coming up. They're running out of power
Yep.
in the US, right? And even if they have power, it's at high cost, So if there are workloads which can move out of the US, where else
Mm.
can they go, which is geopolitically neutral,
Yep.
safe, where power is available, the government is friendly, the government has their act together. And
Yep.
as you start building a Venn diagram around that, the circle tends to start shortening down to very, very few locations. And India is one of those beneficiaries where we feel that a lot of US big AI labs are going to bring
Yep.
their AI workloads to markets like India. So we are anticipating a lot of growth there.
Before I go to the next question, I think a question that I've been wanting to ask you is if a company wants to get into the data center business, what do you and your team offer in terms of services? What is it that, if you can share with everybody here?
Yeah, we do. First of all, Gautam, I should have said thanks for inviting me for this
Not at
session.
all.
But we are a bunch of experts who are very, very passionate to build and help our clients.
Sure.
I've been with JLL now almost 22 years, and through my career, I've been focused on largely on real estate and fundraising, and now I am fully, almost dedicatedly working in the digital infrastructure space. And what
Yep.
my team does is on the transaction side, if a data center operator wants to set up shop, we help them source land, powered land, infrastructure, joint venture with a local partner if required. We're doing for hyperscalers. We do a lot of build-to-suit deals, powered land acquisitions, a lot of the new, deals that you hear about in the news. We can't name them, but we've been
Sure.
involved in a lot of that stuff.
Yep.
Um, um, we do a lot of work on the fundraising side for data center operators, and ancillary businesses where these are largely private trades where we would do private equity raises, largely working in the institutional space,
Yep.
and debt raising, project financing and all of this. So we would do that.
Okay.
Then we do a lot of work on the customer acquisition side. So we've got a separate team which is fully focused on customer acquisition. So if a colocation data center operator like Control S, Iffy, NTT, STT, these are some of the big players, and that was one of the questions. If they build a data center, we place the customers for them, right?
Okay.
So we recently acted for India's largest bank, public sector bank. We acted for them for a 10 megawatt capacity, which we closed with a large privately held Indian data center operator. We worked for India's largest payment gateway platform,
Yep.
publicly held, public sector organization. We helped them again with another Indian data center operator. So we've been working with multiple such organizations. We work with most of the banks, financial institutions, and help them run the governance process to acquire the data center space. Now,
Got it.
along with all of this, we have a very strong research platform where we research and we track all the data center build and operating capability.
Sure.
We have a very large project management business. So if someone is looking at building a data center, I've got a team of specialists who are go-to guys who can put a full project team together and project manage and build this data center. And then we
Sure.
do operations where we run a lot of operations for critical environments like these data centers and clean rooms, and we can operate these as service providers. So other than taking the principal position, we would do all aspects of data
All
center.
of the above. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Another question that's come in is any perspective on air cooling being converted to liquid cooling data centers, and how big is that market? What's the future of liquid cooling data centers in India, do you think?
So this is now this question is completely linked to the innovation in the chips, right?
Hmm.
So so let's, for the sake of this conversation, let's stick with NVIDIA, right?
Yep.
And and there are many companies. There's Broadcom building the TPUs for Google, and then we've got AMD, and then we've got Cerebras, all kinds of companies, Intel, they've got their own chips per se, but we'll stick with one family of chips, which is the biggest one, NVIDIA.
Yep.
In NVIDIA's chips, right? How are you stacking these servers up, right? So we had, if you look at, let's say, a H100s or H200s per se, right? When we had to solution those servers, we stacked them up in a single server rack, and these server racks were typically about 45 kilowatts in a
Yep.
single rack. And then we were placing these racks close to each other so that they could all work as a unit together using network equipment. And the closer I could get them, the better it could be. Now you can only imagine the amount of heat that they're generating. So the way we solutioned that was using a technology called rear door heat exchangers, where there are heat exchangers set up on the back of the server rack, and they are helping keeping this cool. So that's one. This is an air-cooled technology, right?
Sure.
Now we are solving for the next generation of chips with a higher capex, which is called the DCLC, which is direct to chip liquid cooling, right?
Mm.
And that is, so if I have to set up Blackwell chips, which are GB200s or GB300s, those, I need chip level cooling. And these are a lot more get stacked together. So a GB200 will probably, there are 72 servers stacked up in one server rack, which is pretty large. Um,
Yep.
Uses up copper wire up to 2 kilometers within that one server rack. It's
Wow.
pretty intense out there. Yeah,
Yep.
so we use direct to chip cooling where there is a separate CDU set up and there's piping coming in, and then you have liquid. This is not water. This is liquid. These are coolants which are used, which go all the way to the chip where which cold plate, which then keeps the chip cooled. And that is where it is working at high efficiency. Now, these server racks are typically at about 130, 140 kilowatts per rack. It's
Yep.
intense. In the future, the next generation of chips, it is going to be using 1 megawatt in a single server rack, right? That's the Rubin. As that comes in, we will probably be dabbling with immersive cooling, where it'll be like an ice cream cart where you will put the servers in a coolant
Yep.
liquid. Either way, I mean, there's going to be a lot of use for plumbers, to get all these liquids to cool, to go from one place to another. But
Yep.
I think it's all linked with your question around obsolescence, new
Yep.
technology, and the liquid cooling. They're all linked with each other.
Okay. Interesting. The other question that's come in is who are the key players present in building the data center infrastructure? And obviously, a lot of people want to know if there are any listed companies in the space that do that, or is it, the same boring Larsen and Toubros, or some of the other infra companies, which are not pure plays in a true sense.
So I would not want to go too much into naming specific companies per se, but you
Yeah.
have the data center operators. Um, the way the market is globally, most of the data center operating, in fact, in the US, we've seen multiple situations where large 10, $12 billion deals have happened where
Mhm.
listed companies have been taken private.
Oh, wow,
Right?
that's interesting.
So
Yeah.
globally, especially in the US, the trend has been more of take private than going public. Number one.
Oh, okay.
Number two, we and the reason is it's a lot of capital guzzling. Some of these data center operators have to navigate with their customers, so they need to be nimble, per se. We saw another piece where Macquarie had come out in Asia, and they had given signals in the market for a potential IPO for Air Trunk, which they 100% which they owned controlling stake in. And ultimately, they did not go in for an IPO. They did a private trade with Blackstone and CPPIB, and that platform was sold at a very, very good valuation. I think it was about 16 billion US, a massive deal. Um, so that's another proof of a private trade per se. Now, while
Interesting.
that is happening, Indian markets, of course, have been very, very interesting. I think there's one very, very credible operating platform which has filed a DRHP.
Yeah,
So that's again in public market. That is SIFI. So that's definitely going to be an interesting one to look out for. Um,
sure.
but if you look at the value chain on the construction EPC side, there are number of guys which are very, very active. We have Tata Projects,
Yeah,
L&T. Some of the biggest players are going to be the boring names, Gautam. These are. I mean, and if you're giving 1,000 crore, 2,000 crore, 5,000 crore project, you want a strong, credible counterparty
yeah.
uh, doing that per se. On the EPC construction EPC side. But
We have,
again, within
yeah,
that, we are seeing a lot of innovation where, reducing labor dependency, trying to do more precast, prefab constructions, reducing the construction period, all of that is happening.
we have an interesting question here. Michael Burry has shorted AI companies, uh, stating that annual depreciation is being underestimated by the street, and they're using 6 years instead of three. What do you think of this? I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, how quickly should this be depreciated as a overall project? I don't mean just the GPUs, but overall.
So, this is a very subjective point. Um, until a few years ago, actually, the big American big tech cloud players used to depreciate their servers over 5 years.
Hmm.
They increased it to 6 years.
Oh,
And I think that was about 2 or 3 years back. They had changed that. Um, we I am personally of belief, and I'm again highlighting. There's you can you know if you're building a model, right, you can buy the Ferrari of or a Lamborghini of chips, right?
yeah,
Um, uh, 2 years later, there will be a newer model. There'll be something, new technology which will be there, which will be faster at lower cost. Effective total cost can be lower or whatever. Um,
yeah,
but this still computes. I mean, it's not going out of this thing. So and there will be enough and more use cases, right? So if today I'm building, let's say I'm using a hypothetically, let's say I buy H200 from NVIDIA, and
yeah,
I am using those to train Chat GPT 6, right? I mean, we've got 5 is out, so
yeah,
let's say Chat GPT 6, I'm training Chat GPT 6. And it's a big, big model, right? Massive model. But then there are going to be so many startups which are going to be building smaller businesses on top of that, right?
yeah,
They are enterprises, right? I mean, Nepean Capital might be looking at building an AI model on the data that you own, right?
yeah,
You may want to rent a GPU and run a model on top of certain financial markets or whatever. And
yeah,
and that you don't need to get the Ferrari for that, right? You can get whatever is available at the right cost in economics, and different kinds of not everything is most complicated, you're not solving for Formula One
Yeah,
everywhere. So there is going to be a huge opportunity throughout the value chain and different kinds of use cases for these chips. So Michael Burry's comment is interesting, but that is looking at it in a very very linear way. But
sure. We've heard of companies here, some of which are listed. I don't want to get into names, as we're not necessarily discussing names on this call.
yeah,
But we met them. We met the founders, and they seem to be offering data center or cloud services at literally half the cost of some of the foreign players, and still seem to have a 40%, 45% EBITDA margin.
yeah,
How are they able to do that? And is that a sustainable business model?
yeah. This is an interesting one. I mean, I'm not. I, given the way technology is moving, if let's say I'm a big tech startup, I won't give business to an Indian cloud player just because it's cheaper.
Cheaper.
I think it's going to be so. Let's say if I am Zomato and I've got these 100 applications which are running.
Yeah,
I mean, if Indigo goes down for a little bit of time, we all are getting, you know, all our travel plans are going for a toss. Our travel
yeah,
budgets are going for a toss across our organizations, right? I mean, think
exactly.
of if one of these kind of apps go down. So for them, having their application running it's mission critical. If they go
Yeah,
off for a bit, they will, users are going to consider it as not reliable and stop using it and maybe flip to Swiggy or whatever the other next best app which is there. So you need to have 100% uptime. You need the
yeah,
best quality, but you also need to keep offering newer and newer features. Now that
yeah,
those newer features need to be backed by what Amazon AWS cloud is offering them as
yeah,
additional features, which they can build on at the software layer. So there's a lot of innovation and depends on how that innovation is happening. I think
sure.
I don't think it's going to be I don't think this is purely a pricing game. It's going to be, I think in cloud, it is going to be innovation game if they can play it in the right way,
Mm,
they are able to throw enough resources at it. But I think the bigger piece where some of these type of platforms may end up winning is the geopolitical sense of uh, sovereign cloud. So if
okay.
I have a very nationalist view, I'm an
Yeah,
organization, I say that I'm a big Indian national. I start thinking of myself as a national company and I say that my workloads cannot sit on a cloud of a company which is owned by Americans or
yeah,
Chinese or French. I would
yeah,
want it to be hosted in servers which are owned by Indians or
yeah,
national. That may, and that is a big play right now. Sovereign cloud is a big play,
yeah,
especially for public sector and government projects. So you will see some of so if some of these Indian cloud guys can get their product right, I would really
mm,
want to double click on the product and what are they really doing and where they're innovating and what are the offering they're bringing and is it as resilient as some of these other infrastructure. That's what, because a lot of them don't. If you're not, I mean, if you're selling it cheap, it means, do you really have that level of resiliency? What if it goes down? So
yeah.
one has to look at that.
No, absolutely. Listen, thank you so much, Rachit. I promised we'd do this in an hour. We're just over an hour now.
Yeah,
So, really thank you for your time. And I think everybody who's participated, I'm going to give you a lot of feedback on this. But people who participated and have ambitions to get into the data center business, please
yeah,
reach out to Rachit. Happy to send you his contact details. Rachit, we'll be in touch. We will host you again very soon, as this space is, I think, one of the most exciting spaces in India, not just globally, but specifically in India, and for all the reasons that we discussed. Thank you
yeah.
again, and wish you and your team all the best.
Gautam, once again, thank you so much for inviting me on this session. I mean, this is a great platform and great visibility for us to talk. And thank you so much. Looking forward to meeting you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.